I came home from college to visit my family, but Dad yelled, "You're useless now, go back." I smiled and told him, "Alright, but I'm taking the car with me." And then his face turned red. I can still feel the early autumn chill in the air as I pulled up to the old family house. The leaves were just beginning to turn gold and red, and for a moment, I let myself think the homecoming would be pleasant. After all, it had been nearly a year since I left for college, and this was supposed to be a quick visit to reconnect with everyone, especially Dad. But from the second I stepped through the front door, I could sense something was off. My younger brother, Nick, barely glanced up from his video game, muttering a half-hearted "hey" before going back to his screen. My mother was bustling in the kitchen, not even bothering to look over her shoulder to acknowledge me. And Dad stood in the living room, arms crossed, his jaw tight as he stared at me like I was some stranger who'd walked into his house by mistake. I tried to break the ice. "Hey, Dad. It's good to see you. How've you been?" His reply came faster than I could have imagined, sharp enough to cut the air. "You're useless now. Go back." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I just stood there, stunned. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. Not today. Instead, I mustered a smirk, one I didn't quite feel, and said, "All right. But I'm taking the car with me." I saw his face flush crimson, a mix of disbelief and fury as the weight of my words hit him. For a split second, I thought he might actually lunge at me, but he just stood there, fuming. Without waiting for another word, I pulled the spare key from my pocket, the one I'd borrowed when he wasn't looking last Christmas, and headed for the garage. I could feel Dad's glare burning into the back of my neck as I walked toward the garage. His words echoed in my mind, sharp and jagged, "You're useless now. Go back." I wanted to let it go, pretend like it didn't matter, but each step I took only fed the fire simmering in my chest. The garage door creaked open as I slid inside, revealing the sleek, navy blue Ford Mustang that Dad had always treated like his firstborn. He'd spent countless weekends polishing every inch of it, running his hands over the leather seats like they were made of gold. The Mustang wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of everything he valued. And now, I was about to take it. I ran my fingers over the cool metal of the hood, and felt a flicker of satisfaction. For all his talk about me being useless, it was my late-night tutoring sessions, my part-time campus jobs, and my relentless determination that had landed me a full scholarship, something he hadn't even congratulated me for. If he thought I was useless, maybe it was because I wasn't useful to him anymore. As I climbed into the driver's seat, I caught a glimpse of him through the narrow garage window. His face was still red, his mouth moving as if he were cursing me under his breath. I almost laughed. It was as if he believed the Mustang itself would stop me from leaving. I revved the engine, the rumble vibrating through the floorboards and echoing through the garage. It felt rebellious, exhilarating. But underneath the bravado, I felt a flicker of guilt. Why was he so angry? Why did he look at me like I was a threat rather than his son? Before I could let the weight of it pull me down, I backed the car out of the garage and onto the street. The house grew smaller in the rearview mirror as I accelerated, the Mustang's engine roaring to life under my touch. My heart was pounding, a mixture of adrenaline and the bitter realization that whatever family reunion I had hoped for was never going to happen. But I wasn't done yet. I had an idea, something that would make Dad's head spin. The drive back to campus felt surreal, like I'd stepped into a version of my life I'd only imagined. The Mustang hummed beneath me, the rumble of the engine smooth and comforting in a way my father's voice never was. I should have felt triumphant, but instead, a strange calm settled over me. Halfway there, the idea struck me. It wasn't enough just to leave. I wanted to show Dad that I wasn't as useless as he claimed. I wanted him to see that the same son he dismissed could make something out of nothing, and do it with his prized car. I pulled over at a gas station and snapped a photo of the Mustang gleaming under the midday sun. The hood gleamed with a fresh polish, the Mustang logo catching the light just right. I opened my phone and posted it on Instagram, tagging my dad's account, the one he always used to show off the car at local shows. Caption: "Finally putting this useless car to good use. Thanks, Dad." Almost immediately, likes and comments flooded in from friends back home and classmates. "Whoa, sick ride," someone commented. "Didn't know you had a Mustang," another wrote. I grinned and kept scrolling. But one notification stopped me cold. Dad had seen the post. And he'd left a comment. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" For a split second, I hesitated. But then I tapped out a reply, one that would dig just a little deeper. "Guess I'm not so useless after all, huh, Dad?" I hit send. The adrenaline rush was immediate. My phone buzzed nonstop with reactions and laughter from friends who were following the exchange. I could practically hear Dad's blood pressure rising through the screen. But I wasn't finished yet. I had one more move to make, one that would ensure my so-called uselessness wasn't just a rebellious act, it was a declaration. By the time I reached campus, the Mustang had turned more heads than I could count. People were staring, pointing, snapping photos. The guy who usually parked his dented old truck next to my dorm gave me a thumbs up as I pulled into the lot. It felt good. No, it felt great. I wasn't just back at college. I was making an entrance. I parked the Mustang in the most conspicuous spot I could find, right near the student center where everyone was milling about between classes. Before I even got out, I posted a second photo on Instagram, this time of the Mustang parked with the campus clock tower in the background. Caption: "Guess who's not so useless after all? Hashtag back at it, hashtag thanks Dad." I barely had time to lock the doors before my friends descended, their eyes wide and their mouths practically hanging open. "Dude, where'd you get this beast?" my roommate Mark asked, circling the car like it was a rare museum piece. "Long story," I said with a grin, stuffing my hands in my pockets. A couple of girls from my philosophy class wandered over, their curious smiles adding to the scene. "I didn't know you had a Mustang," one of them said, her voice lilting with interest. I shrugged, playing it cool. "Borrowed it from the family. You know, to get some real use out of it." Mark clapped me on the back. "Legend. You've got to bring this to the party tomorrow night. Everyone's gonna lose it." I grinned, feeling that rare surge of confidence I usually only got after acing an exam or pulling off a tricky lab experiment. But this was different. This was the kind of spotlight my father could never control. And just as I was soaking it all in, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from my dad. "Call me. Now." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. But I wasn't ready to let him off the hook just yet. I slid the phone back into my pocket and turned back to my friends. "Let's take it for a spin," I said, the words tasting sweet on my tongue. With Mark riding shotgun and a few others crammed into the back seat, I eased the Mustang out of the lot, the low growl of the engine drawing more stares. I took it slow at first, enjoying the feeling of control, the weight of the wheel in my hands, the way the car seemed to hum with power under my touch. As we cruised through the campus streets, Mark leaned out the window, calling out to a couple of guys from our dorm. "Hey! Check out what Alex is driving!" he shouted, grinning like a maniac. They whistled and gave me a thumbs up, and I felt that surge of adrenaline again, like I was reclaiming something I didn't even know I'd lost. Mark turned back to me, laughing. "Dude, this is epic. Your dad's gonna flip when he sees everyone hyped about his car." I smirked. "He already has. Check this out." I handed Mark my phone, showing him the Instagram comments. His eyes widened as he read the back and forth between me and my dad. "No way," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're roasting him and showing off. Man, you've got to bring this thing to the big event tomorrow. Everyone's going to be talking about it." I hesitated, feeling a flicker of something, guilt maybe. But then I remembered Dad's words, that sharp dismissal, "You're useless now. Go back." Fine. If he thought I was useless, I'd show him just how useless I could be. "Yeah," I said, my voice low but certain. "Let's make this unforgettable." Mark whooped, and we took a slow cruise through campus, the Mustang's engine rumbling beneath us, the weight of my father's insult fading with every turn of the wheels. The next night, the whole campus seemed to buzz with energy. The annual fall festival, a mix of live music, food trucks, and an unofficial after-party, was the perfect stage for my little rebellion. Mark and I had spread the word, and by the time we rolled up to the event, the Mustang was practically glowing under the streetlights. People gathered around as I stepped out, casually leaning against the car like I wasn't fully aware of the attention it was drawing. Music thumped in the background, and I could hear snippets of conversations about the guy with the Mustang. My name whispered with a mix of curiosity and awe. Mark handed me a soda, his grin wide. "You're a legend, man. Seriously. Everyone's talking about this." I pulled out my phone, snapping a few more pictures of the car, this time with the festival lights twinkling in the background. I tagged my dad again, adding a playful caption. "Not so useless now, huh, Dad? Hashtag Festival King, hashtag Mustang Life." The comments rolled in almost immediately, friends laughing, strangers admiring, even a few classmates asking if I'd give them a ride later. For the first time, I felt completely in control, like I was finally steering my own story rather than being a passenger in Dad's. But beneath the buzz of excitement, there was a hint of unease I couldn't quite shake. As if I was dancing on the edge of something much deeper than just petty revenge. I took a long sip of my soda, staring at the car, the festival lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of color. Somewhere in the back of my mind I heard Dad's voice, his disappointment, his dismissal, but it was faint, distant. For now, I was going to enjoy this moment. I didn't even check my phone again that night. The festival was too alive, too noisy, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't just a background character in my own life. Friends I hadn't spoken to in months were suddenly drawn to me, wanting to know where I'd gotten the car, asking for photos, stories, rides. It felt like the whole world had tilted, putting me, just for a moment, right at the center of it all. But as the music faded into the night, and the crowd dispersed, the weight of what I'd done finally settled on me. I found myself sitting alone on the hood of the Mustang, my phone heavy in my pocket. The streetlights cast long shadows over the empty lot, and the festival's laughter and lights seemed like a distant memory. Curiosity won out, and I finally checked my messages. There were dozens of texts from my dad, each one angrier and more frantic than the last. "You think you're clever? You've humiliated me. This isn't a game, Alex. Bring the car back now. Don't you dare ignore me." There were a few from my mom too, softer but laced with guilt. "Alex, please. Your father's upset. Come home, we'll talk about it. This isn't the way to handle things." I stared at the screen, my heart a knot of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to laugh at their desperation. After years of dismissing me, now they were practically begging. But another part of me, the quieter part, ached with something closer to regret. Why had Dad lashed out like that when I came home? What was behind his cold words? His harshness had always been there, a low hum in the background, but this time it felt different. Sharper. More desperate. Had he felt threatened? The thought made me shift uncomfortably. I remembered the way he looked at me as I stood in the doorway that day, like I wasn't his son, but something else. Something he couldn't control. Maybe it wasn't just about me. Maybe it was about him feeling powerless, about the shifting dynamic he wasn't ready to face. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me with a hollow ache in my chest. But still, I wasn't ready to let it go. The next morning, I posted a final photo. This one was more reflective, the Mustang parked under the rising sun, the empty festival grounds behind it. Caption: "Sometimes you have to take what's yours. Hashtag moving forward." I knew Dad would see it. I knew he'd fume. But I also hoped, just a little, that he'd understand. Or at least that he'd realize I wasn't useless after all. I dropped the car off at my uncle's place before heading back to my dorm. Uncle Jim was always a good guy, the kind of man who gave solid advice and didn't judge. He agreed to keep the Mustang for a while, just in case Dad tried to come after it in a rage. "I'll hold on to it," he said with a grin. "You've earned a break." That night, as I sat in my dorm room, the Mustang's keys resting on my desk, I felt an odd mix of pride and melancholy. I'd stood up for myself. I'd proven a point. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Dad's anger than I'd realized. He wasn't just mad about the car. He was mad because, for the first time, he couldn't control me. And maybe that scared him. The next morning was uncomfortably quiet. No buzzing phone, no frantic calls from Dad, not even the usual passive-aggressive messages from Mom. It was as if the whole thing, the argument, the Mustang, the posts, had just evaporated into silence. At first I thought I'd won. That Dad had finally realized his mistake, and was too ashamed to say anything. But as the hours dragged on, a different kind of unease settled in. This wasn't Dad's style. He didn't do silence, he did noise, arguments, accusations, demands. I found myself refreshing my messages, waiting for something, anything. But my inbox stayed empty, the read receipts from my family's accounts mocking me. Mark noticed the change in my mood. He nudged me as we sat on the dorm steps, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "You okay, man?" I hesitated, then sighed. "It's weird. Dad's just gone silent. Like he's ignoring the whole thing now." Mark shrugged. "Maybe he's giving up. Maybe he realized he was wrong. But that didn't feel right. Dad wasn't the type to admit defeat, even silently. Something was off." Later that evening, my phone finally buzzed. But it wasn't a message from Dad, it was from my uncle, Jim. "Alex, you should come over. We need to talk." My stomach twisted. Uncle Jim didn't use those words lightly. I drove over, my mind racing with possibilities. Was Dad planning something? Was he furious enough to involve lawyers, or worse, the police? I doubted he'd report me for stealing the Mustang. It was technically the family car, but his pride might push him to extremes. Uncle Jim was waiting for me on the porch, his expression grave. We sat on the steps, just like we used to when I was a kid visiting for holidays. He didn't sugarcoat it. "Your dad called me," he said quietly. "He's not mad about the car." "Not really." I frowned. "Then what?" Jim rubbed his jaw, his voice low. "He's scared, Alex. Scared that you're not coming back. That you don't need him anymore. That you're finally seeing through his bull." I stared at him, stunned. "He's scared of me?" Jim nodded. "Not of you exactly, but of losing control. Your dad's always been a man who needs to feel in charge. You coming back from college, more independent, more confident, threatens that. And you taking the car? Posting about it, calling him out? That's his nightmare." I sank back against the porch railing, the weight of it all finally settling on me. I hadn't expected this. I thought I was just proving a point, showing him I wasn't useless. But I hadn't realized how deeply it would cut. Jim sighed. "Look, I'm not saying you should feel bad." He needed to be called out. "But just be careful. Pride's a dangerous thing, and your dad has a lot of it. He might lash out, or he might just shut down. Either way, don't let him drag you down with him." I nodded, my thoughts tangled and heavy. "What should I do?" Jim clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Live your life, kid. Show him that you're fine without his approval. That's the best way to win this." As I drove back to campus that night, the Mustang's keys heavy in my pocket, I felt a strange mix of victory and sadness. I'd stood up to Dad, but I'd also peeled back a layer of his anger and found fear. Fear of losing his grip. Fear of being left behind. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as invincible as I'd always thought. The days that followed were strangely quiet, almost like the eye of a storm. I went to classes, kept up with work, and even managed to enjoy some downtime with friends, but the Mustang's key still sat heavily in my pocket like a silent weight. My Instagram posts continued to get reactions, likes, comments, even private messages from classmates who said they wished they could have stood up to their parents like I had. But none of it filled the hollow ache in my chest. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was more like unease. Like I'd started something bigger than I could control, and now I was waiting for the fallout. Late one evening, as I sat in my dorm room staring at the Mustang keys on my desk, my phone buzzed. This time it wasn't a text. It was a call. From my dad. I hesitated, staring at the screen as his name flashed over and over. part of me wanted to reject it, to let him stew in his own silence. But something deeper, curiosity, maybe, or just a lingering tie I couldn't sever, made me swipe to answer. Alex. His voice came through, quieter than I'd ever heard it. Not angry. Not demanding. Just tired. Yeah? I said cautiously. There was a pause, and I could almost hear him struggle to find the right words. I saw the pictures. The posts. Everyone's been talking about it. Even people at work. They think it's funny. They think I got what I deserved. I said nothing, letting him fill the silence. His voice cracked, just a little. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. When I said you were useless, it wasn't about you. It was about me. About feeling like I couldn't keep up. Like I wasn't the man I used to be. You coming back from college, so confident, so independent, I didn't know how to handle it. I felt left behind. I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. This wasn't the father I knew. This was a man stripped bare, vulnerable, his anger unmasked as fear. Why didn't you just say that? I asked quietly. Because I'm a stubborn old fool, he admitted, and for a second I heard the ghost of a bitter laugh. And because I thought, if I kept control, if I stayed the one calling the shots, I wouldn't have to face the fact that you don't need me anymore. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling as the weight of his words settled over me. Dad, I don't need you the way I used to. But that doesn't mean I don't want you in my life. It just means I need you to respect me. To see me as an adult. Not as someone you can control or dismiss. There was a long pause. Then, softly, I'm sorry, son. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't erase the years of harsh words, of dismissals, of being made to feel small. But it was something. A crack in the wall he built around himself. I'm not bringing the car back, I said, my voice steady but not unkind. Not yet. I need some time. For both of us. I could almost hear him nod on the other end. Fair enough. Just don't cut me out completely, okay? I'll try to do better. I will. For the first time in a long while, I believed him. After we hung up, I sat there in silence, the Mustang keys still resting on my desk. The victory didn't feel quite so sharp anymore. It felt more like resolution. A step forward, not just for me, but maybe for both of us. I knew it wouldn't be easy. My dad was still the same stubborn man, and I was still figuring out where I fit in the world. But at least now, the lines were drawn not in anger, but in understanding. I picked up the keys, feeling their weight for what it really was, not just a symbol of rebellion, but a bridge between where I came from and where I was going. A week later, I drove the Mustang back home, the ride smoother and less defiant this time. Dad was waiting in the driveway, hands in his pockets, his posture almost uncertain. I stepped out, keys in hand, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. No words. No accusations. Just a quiet recognition that things had shifted. I held out the keys. Here. He took them, nodding, but he didn't look triumphant. Just relieved. Thanks, he said softly. I gave him a faint smile. I'll be back for Thanksgiving, I said. And this time, he just nodded again. I'll see you then. As I turned to leave, I realized it wasn't about the car anymore. It was about reclaiming respect, and maybe the start of something better.